for October 24th, 2023. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our mission statement is Learning for Life. Our vision statement is Southgate Community Schools, the best choice for students and parents. And it brings us to D, which is the approval of the agenda. I'll entertain a motion on the agenda.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Okay, I have a motion by Dr. Pomponio. Is there support?
Support.
Supported by Mr. Green. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we have an agenda. First item on that agenda that's approved is presentations, the fiscal year 23 audit presentation. Anything leading up, or we're just gonna jump right in?
Jump right in.
All right. Is that this one?
It is, yes. I don't need a president. It is sliding.
Hit the power button right at the bottom. It should come back up on.
All right, well, good evening. My name is Daniel Clark. I'm the assigning principal on the Southgate Community Schools 2023 audit. You should have received 3 documents tonight, one of which was the filing copy of the official financial statements that was presented to the MDE. One is the board communication letter, looks like this, and then this is the presentation which we will go through, which summarizes both of these documents. So, happy to discuss anything in these, but hopefully within this presentation. So hopefully what's in that, in this presentation will cover anything in there. So with that, if you want to go to slide 2, just going to introduce the team members. We do have required annual board communications. Obviously talk about some financial results of the district, talk about some upcoming accounting pronouncements, and then happy to answer any questions. So I introduced myself. Tracy Kendall was the senior manager. Shelby Bailey was the senior, both of which were on your engagement last year. And then we did add Alexi Day as well as the staff individual. So slide number 4. Happy to state that the district again received an unmodified or a clean opinion on the June 30th, 2023 financial statement. So exactly what you would be looking for in an opinion from an auditor. Number 2, we're asked to communicate any new accounting pronouncements that may or may not have any impact on the financial statements. So this year there was one, GASB, which stands for Government Accounting Standards Board, number 96, related to SPITAs. So that stands for Subscription-Based Internet Technology Arrangements, a mouthful there. So we did assess those, and we did spend quite a bit of time, along with Barb, collecting information related to any long-term contracts that related to this new standard, and we'll talk about that briefly in a little bit. Number 3, we are asked to assess estimates that are used to calculate certain things like any allowance on uncollectible accounts, those things that calculate your compensated absences, depreciation expense, et cetera, et cetera. We assess those and deem those all to be reasonable. Number 4, 5, and 6 kind of all relate together. Happy to state that there were no difficulties that we encountered during the audit, so all the questions we asked were answered, all the information we asked for was provided. So appreciate Barb and Ms. Irvine and all the staff that made this a very successful audit this year. So thank you for the efforts. And that speaks to number 5 and 6. The records that were provided to us were clean. We had no material misstatements this year, so that was excellent. So everything that was provided to us was well prepared, and happy to state that there were no issues noted there. There was one immaterial past adjustment, and again, I'll go back up to GASB 96, that it was assessed that it was not an immaterial need for that to be booked on the financial statements, so the district agreed to pass on that adjustment, so no issues noted there. And then number 6, again, you were issued a clean opinion, but furthermore, that there were no material weaknesses noted, no significant deficiencies, or even other matters noted for consideration. So pretty much no better audit that could be provided than what was provided this year. Any questions I can answer on that?
Yes, well, actually, 1.5. So immaterial past is not meant to be PAST, it's meant to be passed as in.
Meaning we
the way it's
passed
stated.
on making the adjustment,
Got it.
yes.
And then, if there were no significant deficiencies, are there insignificant deficiencies that we should?
No, there were no items noted for consideration to be presented. All right. Moving on to slide 5. So because the district does receive significant federal money, we do what's called a single audit as well. This is an audit specifically targeted towards federal dollars. So the district this year received about $7.8 million in federal funding related to various different programs. We are required to test certain programs based on certain criteria. We issue 2 reports on those federal dollars, one related to controls and one related to compliance. And again, as stated in the previous slide, there were no findings either with compliance or controls related to those federal programs. We did test 2 different programs this year, one related to your special education cluster, and one related to your Educational Stabilization Fund, also known as ESSER, so that COVID money that you continue to receive, which will be winding down in future years. Again, no findings, excellent single audit as well.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there a standard way that districts report that you look for in the budget for federal expenditures or federal awards?
A standard way in which they report.
Standard report or standard budget that you look at, that you don't see anything outside of that that's different?
I'm not sure I
Or
understand.
is it reported just on one schedule or one?
Yeah, so if you go to this document, sorry if I misunderstood the question.
Sorry, that's
If you go to page number 78, 79, 80, 81, this is what's called the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. So
Okay.
I think this
Yeah,
might be what
that's
you're
what I was
asking.
looking for.
So this has all your federal money. If you go to page 81 is the last page, go all the way over to the right. There's a second column from the right is your current year expenditures. Go all the way down to the bottom. You'll see that you had 7.779 in federal expenditures. And again, it's made up of these various programs listed on the previous 3 pages.
Okay, that answered my question.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Sorry if I misunderstood.
Oh, that's okay.
So yes, and this is a standard format that all school districts in the state of Michigan produce, so it should look very similar. If you look up somebody else's
Okay.
financials, they should have a similar schedule.
So if there's anything out of the ordinary, what would that be? Have you ever seen anything out of the ordinary, like moving it to like some other fund or?
So typically with federal programs, what we're looking for is more compliance-based. So there are 6 compliance requirements that we're required to look at. They can range from anything about allowability, cash management, eligibility, reporting, subrecipient monitoring, et cetera, et
Okay.
cetera. So that's what we're looking at, to making sure that not only are you spending the money on the specific purpose, but like if there are other requirements that we're testing all of those. So yes, I mean, there are typically, findings are not unusual. So I would say to not have any findings is a great mark
Okay,
for
thank
the
you.
district. Yeah, yep.
Yeah, I was curious.
Any other questions? Okay. So we can then move on to slide 6, which starts the financial aspect of the district. So you'll see at the very bottom under 2023, the district has 154,984, so 154 million in assets. compared to just over 100 million last year, so an increase of $54 million in assets. The major changes I wanted to speak to, one, your cash and cash investments went up about 18 million. Obviously, the district did issue new bonds this year, equating to about 25 million. Some of that was spent, but a lot of that was unspent as of June 30th, so a lot of that is yet to be spent. In fact, most of it is yet to be spent in 2023 and thereafter. You also did receive significant additional state aid this year, so that caused that increase as well in the receivable balance, which was yet to be collected at year end. The net capital asset balance also, so like if you go down about halfway through that schedule, your net capital assets increased about 10.6 million. So the district had significant capital additions this year, which equated to about 13.3 million. If you go to the MD&A, the management discussion and analysis in the financials, and go to page 11, this will speak to some of the significant additions that the district purchased this year, and it looks like this, and it's at the top of the page here. The most significant addition was the Anderson High School improvements, weight room, et cetera, of about 7.3, and then the Allen Elementary had significant capital improvements, Shelters Elementary, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're interested in what makes up that, that's where that is listed. Going to the next slide, slide number 7. The district then obviously has liabilities. The district had about 218 million in liabilities compared to 175 million last year. So the liabilities did go up significantly this year by about 43 million. And I'll talk mostly about that net pension liability is what pretty much was the largest driver here. The net pension liability is measured at a point in time as of September 30th of the previous year, so September 30th of 2022. Last year, investment returns were very negative, so obviously the liability didn't change significantly, but the investments that went against it were significantly impaired last year. So expectation would be this year, investment returns have been much better. In the state pension plan, we would expect that liability to come back down much closer to the 2022, 2021 number. The other significant change, as you'll look at the long-term debt line item, as I mentioned on the previous slide, obviously the district did issue significant debt this year for improvements of 26 million. So the district had about 26 million in additions, but then they also did pay on previous debts about 3 million in principal payments. So a net of about $24 million. Next slide. So assets minus liabilities equals your equity or your net position. It's made up of these 3 different buckets: net investment and capital assets, restricted money, and unrestricted. And you can look on slide 9. It's a picture of those over the last 5 years here. So that top line is your net investment and capital assets on slide 9 again. You get about 6.7 million in equity in capital assets. So obviously the district did invest significant money in additions this year. And then obviously what also brings that number potentially back down is depreciation expense. So this year the district had more assets added than depreciation expense. So that's what drove that number up a little bit this year. That bottom line is your restricted money. Not significant change there, but that number currently stands at about 1.9 million. So those monies that the district has that have not yet been spent on its intended purpose, those things like debt service, capital projects, and things like grants, et cetera. And then the next slide is your unrestricted balance. And again, this is entity-wide, so it's all funds combined. That bottom line is your unrestricted, and I know that says negative 71 million. So somebody might ask, well, how can equity be negative? Well, this is very typical for all school districts across the state. When pension and other post-employment benefit liabilities were added onto the district's financial statements, that drove those significantly negative. So we like to show that top line of what that effect would be if that was removed. So currently, the district is about a positive $8.6 million. So that continues to increase year over year for the last 5 years. So no issues noted there.
I have one question for you.
Yes.
Is the pension and OPEB always figured off of current employees, or does it also include employees that have retired, or?
Yeah, those are all included in the census. Yeah, yeah, which is calculated in the
So it's
pension
anybody
liability.
who's retired in the system?
That's
and
currently being
current
paid
employees?
and future employees to be paid. Yep. And speaking of pensions, slide 11 shows your pension liability the last 5 years. So if you go all the way over to the right, 2023, your pension liability is at $102,491,000. You're currently funded at 61%. So that did drop from last year. As I already stated, last year you were funded at about 73%. Again, this is completely out of the district's control. It's a lot of what drives this number is the investment return. So again, we would expect this number to be much similar to 2022 moving into 2024. So
Investment return of the state fund.
correct, yes, which again is out of your control
but-
on how that's invested. Yeah. And then similar to the OPEB liabilities, slide 12. In 2023, you had a 5.8 million OPEB liability. In this plan, actually 83% funded, which is excellent. I mean, there's no issues noted there. That did pop up similar to the pension, again, due to investment return problems last year. And then slide 13, your income statement, again, this is entity-wide or school-wide. So the school had 72.3 million in overall revenue. They had 61.3 in expenses, so a net of 11.1 positive. The last 3 years, you'll see that the district-wide had a positive net of a significant amount. Now, I will say this includes fluctuations, including debt, capital additions, that pension and OPEB drive this significantly. So this doesn't necessarily ring true to your actual fund statements, which we will talk about next. So slide 14, the school receives 4 different revenue line items. The most and significant one is that top line, your state revenue. So the district received about 44 million in state revenue, and you'll see that popped up significantly over last year of 34.4. Most of that is a result of the state budget. The dollar per pupil significantly increased, and you guys saw about a $9 million increase in state revenue. That dark black line in the middle is your local money. That remained similar, but it did pop up about $1.7 million, $1.8 million to about 13 million. And then that orange line and the turquoise line, so you had about 7.6 in inter-district revenue, and then your federal money was about 7.9 million. Now you'll see that federal revenue line item has increased significantly since 2019. In 2020 and 21 is when that federal money started kicking in for COVID, and it has increased, and then this year is the first year that it's kind of started going back down. Our expectation would be, as that COVID money is used up in the next year, that you'll be much more similar to those 2019, 2020 federal dollars of around about $4 million. And then we'll talk about the general fund, which is the all-important operating fund of the district. Slide 15. So the district had 55.7 million in revenue. Last year, you had about 47.8, 47.9, so that popped up, again, about $8 or $9 million. Most of that is driven by that state per pupil number, as well as the additional federal money. Expenses also increased, but not to the same extent. So the general fund had a positive net income of about 3.592. You'll see over the last 5 years, the general fund actually has positive every single year, so a good sign that you're building that fund balance to the appropriate level, which we'll talk about on slide 16. So the district in 2023, total fund balance for general fund, all the way over to the right, you had 9.8 million in general fund. In total fund balance, unassigned was just slightly lower than that, so it takes out certain things like those assigned to prepaids, et cetera. So you had about 9.781 in unassigned fund balance. And then we compare that in slide 17 to an annual's worth of expenditures. So in 2023, your fund balance represented about 2.25 months of expenses. So you're currently sitting at about 18.83% of fund balance. The benchmark here that we like to see is between 2 and 3 months, so you're sitting at a really nice number. Much improved since 2019. You'll see that each year you increased that coverage ratio, except last year, which was relatively the same as the previous year. But again, a recommendation between 2 and 3 months, mostly just to protect against potential cash flow issues, et cetera. And then the last slide tonight is slide 18. We have 2 upcoming accounting pronouncements over the next 2 years. One, I put NA at the end. Well, actually, both of them I have. Most of these, we don't expect much impact, if any, on the district's financial statements, but we'll work with Barb and the team to make sure that they're prepared for these. But again, we don't expect any significant impact on how things are being presented. So with that, I can answer any questions.
So we're at a 18 point something fund balance.
18 point,
Yeah,
what was the number? 18.83,
Yep.
83, yes.
okay, that's good.
Yep.
Thank you, that's a good improvement.
Any other questions? No, I don't have it.
I do have one question. So given that we're at a good spot now, but the federal funds are all stopping, or slowing down in pricing, so we won't have that cushion, what are some of the strategies we might think about from your perspective to?
Well, that is a loaded question.
Yeah.
It's a huge question, right? It's-
Well, so I do know a lot of the federal money was, I think the recommendation up front was to make sure that you weren't using that extra money because it was going to be ending on anything that was needing to be sustained, so one-time projects. So I know that that has been a significant challenge because obviously the intent of that money was to keep things moving and to expand services. So it's sort of like this dichotomy of, well, you weren't supposed to do something that was going to need to be sustained. So I do know that that is one thing that we've cautioned districts to make sure that those monies are going to more specific project-based things versus things that are going to have to be funded after that funding dries up. So, but that's easier said than done.
Yeah, and it's still a huge question, and we're obviously thinking about it, but I appreciate your inputs.
Yep.
I can say that the state has come in with quite a bit of grant funding to try to pick up some of the things that ESSER money had covered. So, for instance, we've gotten quite a few award letters that have shown that our at-risk budget is going up quite a bit. They've added other grants like 31AA that's allowing us to place several of our ESSER expenditures in those and ship them. So at this point, that's giving us some opportunity to maintain service levels as they are right now, while decreasing reliance on the federal funds.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
too.
All right. Is there a way we can turn that light off? Because
Oh, yes.
I am,
You don't want that in your eyes the whole time?
no. It's a nice strategy.
If you just slide the front, it'll close the lens.
Oh, I see. There we go.
There you go.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's all right.
Oh, is that Nick?
All right. All right,
Thank
next
you.
item on the agenda is citizens' comments. Is there any member of the public who would like to come up and speak tonight for up to 3 minutes? Okay. Seeing none, go ahead and close public comment. Move to the consent agenda, which consists of minutes from the October 10th, 2023 regular meeting, the HR update, and the September 2023 disbursements. I'll entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Okay, I have a motion by Dr. Pomponio. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Longos. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. Brings us to the action item. The first is approval of the policy package 23-3.
Yes, at our last board meeting, at our first read, we discussed with you the policies that we'd like to put in place for advertising. We know that we have opportunities for advertising that are presenting themselves now, in addition to what we've had available up to this point. We had several language recommendations that came forward in that first read, and then you provided some feedback. Some of the feedback that came was to make sure that we had a mandate for reviewing advertising before before they're produced. And then the other was to make sure that we added expectations or limitations on any organization or individual that may choose to advertise on our property, and whether they can do that without our permission. And so both of those were addressed in the second read. You'll find that there. So it should, I believe, address all the concerns that the board had at the time we presented it. So we'd like to pass this now for final approval.
Any questions for staff? No? Okay. All right, seeing none, we'll bring the discussion back to the table and entertain a motion on action item number 1.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the policy package 23-3 as presented.
Okay, motion by Dr. Pomponio. Support. Is there support? Who was it? Mr. Sage? Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. And action item number 2 is actually my item to the board. It's a superintendent contract extension modification. It does go over the terms, it goes over the amount, and then just some language cleanup to clarify is that it takes out the language about the evaluation and when it puts it on us. It does not take out the evaluation component. That's something we have to do by law. It just removes it from the contract which is odd that it's in the contract, that it puts onus back on us. So
Right.
just a clarification of what that is. So, does anybody have any questions or discussion about that?
I'll just say, also, we're doing this, I know there are some questions out there, that it takes away the date too, right? Like, we have to have it done per year, but we don't have to have it done by a certain date.
Right, it takes out the,
Doesn't lock us into August 31st.
right, it's, yeah, actually language in a contract that could come back at us.
Right. We
which
still
is
have to do
not
it.
needed.
We
Yeah.
still have to do it, but it's not locking us into the date of when to do it in that year.
Right.
I'll just, more comment than question or anything. I mean, just by way, it's January 1, 2024 through June 30, 2027 contract. And like from the minute that we hired Sharon, she's been a leader, not just to do what the board says I should do and wake up and try and figure out what to do every day. She's been a great leader, I think, for the community, certainly a very good, tough to work with sometimes because she has some ideas that may be different than ours, but I mean, I can't think of a better way to say thank you than to approve this contract.
Very good. Okay. With that, with no more questions, I'll entertain a motion on action item number 2.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the extension and modification of the superintendent contract as presented and authorize the board president to execute the contract on behalf of the Board of Education.
Okay, a motion by Dr. Pomponio. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Green. Any discussion, or any further discussion, I should say? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Now, the most important item on the agenda.
Ta-da.
Oh, that's mine, right?
Motion to
Right.
adjourn.
Mr. President,
Mr. Green.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Green to adjourn the meeting. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Lamas. Any discussion?
Yeah, I was gonna say, nobody said anything. I thought we were gonna be here all
I
night.
know.
Just you.
We'll just discuss it.
Seeing no discussion, I'll go ahead and call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Is Angela okay?
Yeah, I think so.